Good morning. Matt Silverman once said verbatim to me, "Babe, God always writes the best stories." Let me tell you one now. You see, I started praying for an Armenian Christian husband at age 16. But I was always fascinated with God's chosen people. So what did God do? On January 1, 2022, while in the throngs of my own serious illness, God gave me both of my heart's desires by sending me a 5'10", half Armenian, half Jewish package named Matt Silverman. God's hand in orchestrating our love story was so evident that you could say Matt was personally signed, sealed, and delivered from God to me. A few years earlier, when we were both healthy, we had driven to Christian camp alone by chance, discovering our chemistry even as friends, laughing about diverse topics like physics and Broadway. Fast forward 5 years, and Matt, amidst his own cancer, rang my doorbell and sat across my bed to give me spiritual support on how to persevere in suffering. He sat there patiently until 11 p.m. with his warm smile, tenderly answering all my questions and accusations against God. At the end of the night, I thanked him for coming, and he responded with a surprising answer that flooded my heart with butterflies. He said verbatim, "There's no place I'd rather be." After about 6 visits, we literally just realized we were falling in love, hard. As Matt once said, we never dated, did we? We just fell in love. I had finally found my unicorn, a quirky, musical nerd, just like me. I would melt when Matt even said Laura in his deep voice. His calm demeanor absorbed my energetic disposition. Right before visits, I would perk up, get out of my pit of self-pity, and start preparing love songs to sing to him as he laid down. My dad would roll his eyes jealously. "Oh, Matt must be coming again." To which I said, "Dad, listen. This guy is the creme de la creme, a handsome, evangelizing engineering PhD who likes politics and theology like me. Get with the program." When I told Matt once his eyes were like beautiful chocolate almonds, he teased, "I didn't know my eyes were edible." I would mail him bright pink Victorian love letters doused in glitter addressed to Trouble Silverman to embarrass him in front of his roommates. I don't know if it worked, but he proposed a few months later. Then, when we took engagement photos at the Pulgaswater Temple, the verse on the temple was Isaiah 43:20, which was also my devotional verse that very morning in my Bible app. The more we thought about it, we decided this must be our wedding theme. Thus, God even orchestrated our wedding verse to teach how he gives believers streams of refreshing water in their desert times. This is our love story. The measure of a life is not its duration, but its donation. I told Matt on date 1 he was the closest representation of Christ I had ever met. It was irresistibly attractive. He gives all his money to charity, fasts when praying for others, teaches children, preaches internationally, and his eyes tell the story of great perseverance in suffering. Matt was cut from a different cloth. His entire countenance shined radiantly with Christ's peace. Thus, Matt's greatest donation was his example of Christ-likeness. I will tell you now about 4 of Matt's godly traits. First, Matt was driven by an unquenchable desire to grow in wisdom, which is why many, like Winston Buey, called upon him to preach. I watched him edit sermons to perfection late at night in agonizing cancer pain. He even drove himself to a Christian camp called Camp Ade for 6 hours with his chemo pump literally hooked up to his chest, despite Anna and my mom telling him not to. Matt was a realist about interpersonal struggles in marriage, so he even sought wisdom by joining a Christian men's group called Grooms with Grit. His desire for wisdom literally had no endpoint. You guys know what I'm talking about. Even while we were watching DuckTales, Matt lit up, informed me of the episode's implicit moral lessons. I was obsessing over popcorn while he was analyzing the moral implications of stealing McDuck's fortune. Living with someone so wise was frankly humbling, like a microscope convicting me of my own deeply sinful ways. Matt's second trait is that because of his past sufferings, he instinctively displayed great compassion for others. When I moved in, I found this old ruffled up blue notebook where he had meticulously scribbled people's names, their specific needs, and the day of the week on which to pray. My heart melted. As for me, he made me feel extremely understood. He was constant and patient with me in my outbursts against God as to why on earth we're suffering, answering my theological questions until 2 a.m. He never once judged me for any of my bitterness, which is very easy to do when both spouses are struggling. Instead, he gave me grace time and time again and gently said, God wants us to have joy in our suffering, right, Laura? Let's try. I was riding on the coattails of Matt's faith, which literally upheld my own and helped me give up my idols like health and career. Words do not suffice to convey the transformative impact his compassion had on my personhood and faith. Third, Matt was incredibly humble and servant-hearted, laser-focused on church, family, and his students. I watched him give lectures in sharp pain, lying down in bed, putting his students' needs over his own. And despite his literal brilliance, at bottom, he was a really simple man, giving no importance to pomp and circumstance. I wish I was more like that. When I told him once that he is the perfect Christian, he got flustered and said, Laura, stop. I'm not perfect, just like any other sinner. Don't idolize me. So even in compliments, he stayed rooted in the gospel. Another example, I once surprised Matt with a fancy new wardrobe and he started tearing up. He said, I always felt guilty spending money on myself, but I'm so happy my wife is taking care of me now. It just never occurred to him to think of himself. Moreover, despite the fact that he wasn't into theater, he sacrificially never once said no to any of my silly requests to record skits, literally at 10 p.m. He even sacrificed his eardrums, not making a single complaint while I screeched on violin at midnight. If that's not sacrificial love, I don't know what is. Instead, Matt fostered my passions, saying once, Laura, you're my Maria from Sound of Music. I was suffering and... Sorry. And then you came into my life bringing music and joy. For a musical lover like me, such a profound compliment flew me to the moon and back. For a Type A engineer, Matt was also surprisingly romantic. The first time he put me in his car, he flirtatiously smiled and said, Milady, your chariot waits. One time, while he was in the hospital, I sent him an 1800 Spanish song in which a lover picks flowers for his señorita in a field. A day later, Matt came home with not one, but 2 large flower bouquets, saying, I just had to reenact that video you sent me and metaphorically pick flowers for my girl. We sat there shocked that he had made it out alive one more time. Last, Matt was supernaturally courageous, teaching me how to be fearless. Chemo after chemo, surgery, CAT scan, you name it, the kid came back, laid down, smiled, and said the same thing every single time. There's my girl. No bitterness, no fear. Some frustration, yes, but not more. And in hospice, Matt went through an excruciating phase of not eating a crumb for 9 weeks and watching his body literally deteriorate without a single complaint about pain or dying young. It was shocking, as Jeff and Lauren and Joey can testify to. And despite facing cancer twice, Matt praised God privately to me until his last breath without a trace of bitterness and only had immense excitement, like not even just peace, excitement about meeting God. This is Matt Silverman, a model of Christ-like submission to God's will, a living testimony of what he preached. His courageous outlook bears powerful witness to the reality that for the Christian, death is nothing but a doorway into Christ's presence forever. For this reason, I proclaim today, my husband is alive right now. See John 11:25. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. This is the power of the gospel. I will pivot here to thank God for blessing our 1-year short marriage. Falling in love amidst illness was a miracle itself. But even after, Matt focused us on Ephesians 5:16, which says, "Make the most of every opportunity, for the days are evil." Indeed, they say those who are not afraid to die, like Matt, are not afraid to live. So we didn't waste time. We made Christian parodies, filmed a movie, started a theology and music YouTube channel, put on 3 musical concerts, gave 2 Christian testimonies, and raised $13,000 for Haiti. I say this not to boast, but to bear witness to the truth of 2 Corinthians, where God says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Even though behind the scenes we laid down holding hands for 50% of every day, God made us fruitful in the land of our affliction by giving us strength time and time again to do the work He called us to do. I will not mince words. We begged God to give us a long life together. God answered no. But Matt always told me, this life is a blip in light of eternity, so focus on eternal things. 1 Corinthians 13 says, 3 things endure: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Thus, ultimately, God did not deny us more beautiful years. Matt and I will have all of eternity to enjoy heaven together in resurrected bodies. This gives me unshakable hope amidst my unfathomable loss. And as I cry out to God, why? I will remember one of Matt's lasting legacies, his constant preaching that God has a sovereign and good purpose for all suffering, even if we cannot understand it on this side. Thus, our love story, as tragic as it is, has great meaning to God. Indeed, God's story never ends in ashes. This is the beauty of Christianity. Just look at Jesus hanging on the cross and then resurrecting. Matt's story is not over as much as it cuts like a knife now. When Matt first got diagnosed, the sermon series at church was the story of Joseph. And Matt drew great strength from that famous line in Genesis that what Satan intends for evil, God intends for good. 3 years later, the night Matt entered heaven, I opened my Bible devotional, and lo and behold, it was on the Joseph story. And it emphasized how God works all things for good, no matter how tragic. That's not a coincidence. It's God's encouragement to us that there is a purpose to Matt's story, and this is not its end. And just as Joseph's suffering led to his premiership, I believe God will reward Matt immensely in heaven, for suffering faithfully to achieve God's hidden redemptive purposes. You see, in Christianity, the cross always leads to glory. I will end here. If grief is the price I have to pay for experiencing Matt's love, I will pay it. Thank you, Matt Silverman, for all you gave me and letting me serenade you. Last summer, you surprised me with a photo album titled A Musical Love Story. That story is not over. I will see you in heaven, my sweet Matthew, where I will love you forever. Thank you.